Alright, this works. Now further forward we do go. Back to the content. Video 3. So what applies to the whole also applies to the parts. So in observing the workings of the totality of life, we can learn how to live our own life. So we turn up the velocity, the sobriety into full and put my finger in the vinegar. And life also teaches us the way it works to align us with the way it works so that we work the way it works. Life aims to restoring balance. What seems like an imbalance on one level integrates into homeostasis on a higher level. There are dying cells and healthy cells, but the organ on the higher level is in balance. Sometimes some organs work overtime, while others rest, but the entire system is in balance. There are also stars dying and being born, but the universe in its entirety is in balance. Physics teaches us that all is energy. Energy itself is neutral. It is charged positively or negatively, but it is neither good nor evil. Good and evil are evaluations from a mental point of view based on our small frame perspective rather than the big picture perspective. Seeing everything that happens as neutral means unconditional acceptance. This is viewing life from life's big picture point of view. Seeing everything that happens through the filter of our mentality in terms of what we want, need, or don't want and need means conditional acceptance. Life's mysterious process leads us to facing situations of experiencing what we want to avoid and losing what we chase in order to break the attachment and integrate the former avoided or sought object into the neutral attitude of indifference. Exactly. Wanting something and fearing to lose the same thing go hand in hand. Like a magnet, we cannot get rid of one side of the polarity. Exactly, this is a great piece of content. Healing is inevitable and goes by itself. Life is a process, it goes by itself. We don't need to do something to start or keep up the process. All we need to do is to stop interfering with the natural process. Awareness heals. Life circumstances can change for the better. Life circumstances change when our internal relation changes. Exactly. Awareness heals. Yeah, this is a great piece of content as well. It is possible to find happiness. Happiness is found to be there and not created anew. Life strives towards balance. Everything that happens to us can be perceived as a teaching towards the restoration of balance, as a movement of energy exchange between opposite polarities like plus and minus in order to balance out to neutral. Success is attracted rather than pursued. What we resist persists. Resistance means interference with the natural process. Resistance interferes with feelings or thoughts running the natural cycle. That means that those feelings or thoughts remain in the system and persist in calling for attention. When the natural process is interfered with, the forces that charges the direction of the natural process builds up until interference is overcome and the natural process can flow. Like the blockage of a water stream. When the flow is blocked, the pressure builds up until the blockage dissolves and the natural process can flow again. Whatever we seek or want, it is never the thing but the emotion we anticipate from getting it. We are never chasing things, but the emotion that is associated with it. We don't chase to have something, but the way that it makes us feel. Exactly. This is also a great piece of content. The internal match the external. To improve aliveness, internal work is needed. So how we relate to the external is a mirror of how we relate to the internal. So when we understand that happiness is the default state only overshadowed by conditioning, external triggers can be seen as the pointer towards internal conditioning that, if we let go of, unearth happiness. The degree and amount of feeling of resistance to external situations, like rejecting, not wanting, being pissed off by happenings, matches the degree of amount of feeling of resistance towards parts of ourselves. When we experience life as dull, unalive, in one mesh, we experience us internally as dull, lacking the variety and depth and one mesh without distinctiveness. An emotionally rich life can only be experienced by an emotionally rich person. The human condition requires us to bring duality and oneness, to bridge duality and oneness, to bridge the mental and the emotional, the real and the imagined, the conditioned and the unconditioned. This is a great piece of knowledge. Events in life happen when the time is right. This can only be felt in the moment. Life does not act according to plan and shoulds. Life acts from the present, not the past. Just because the first flower blossomed last year in mid-February doesn't mean it needs to be that way this year too. It happens when the circumstances are right. So life feels when the present moment is right, not when things should happen according to past memory. This is also a great piece of content. This works. Life has past time memory, but it uses it in an intuitive sense, not in a determining sense. The past is servant to the present, not the present servant to the past. Anticipation of the future also is servant to the present. Life is polar on infinitely many dimensions. Every individual needs to find their own place on those dimensions. The way to find your place in life is to tune in with your intuition. Oftentimes, we head-drivenly move towards each one of the polar extremes in order to naturally gravitate towards our optimum. There is then a trade-off between mental functioning and the present moment. Both cannot exist at the same time. It is either one or the other. We need to find the balance between those two. In the present, contentment is found. Past and future are necessary for our survival. The intuition needs to guide us through this polarity. So life goes from simplicity through complexity, integrating back into coherent simplicity, but with the intuitive knowledge and experience of complexity. The human journey goes through being lost in complexity to arrive at wisdom, like a plant growing from soil through complexity, and blossom and reintegrating back into the earth, but with the experiential knowledge of the complexity of life. In a similar way, we come out of life, gather life experience, get lost in the complexity, and integrate back into life. So this is a general archetype of life also for your understanding. We know little, we accumulate knowledge, we get lost and arrive back in the simplicity, but with the intuitive knowing of complexity. So the formula really reads, you start from simplicity, you go out with the motivation of seeking. This is also a great piece of content. You go through the confusion of complexity and arrive back where you started, but experience the situation from a different place. So the adult journey goes from the polarity of childlike experience of the world, not knowing the opposite, through adult experience of the world, not remembering the opposite, back towards mature experience of the world, childlike but with depth of experience of the opposite polarity. Another aspect of the human journey is you starting out by being yourself. Forget what you are. Seek remembrance in one of the several ways that you are offered. Remember and then be yourself again, but with the depth of experience, the lost son. We are separate in form, but one in essence. Connection means separation in relation. Alienation means separation without any relation. Oneness underlies separation, connection, and alienation. Video 4. We can liken life to a tree and our own lives to different buds of the tree. It is easier to see that the tree is also the bud. From the perspective of the bud, it is not as easy to see that the bud is there. Not in its entirety, of course, the bud is part of the tree, but it is still the tree. We are all from one source. As separate leaves come out of the same tree, we have come out of the same earth. We are all made of the same elements. The iron in our blood was originally in the ancient oceans, and even before that in asteroids that impacted the Earth when it was 700 million years old. The oxygen that feeds our cells is the waste product of bacteria that worked for billions of years in order to enrich the atmosphere. The heart is beaten by the same mysterious, automatic and non-controllable force that makes the wind blow and makes the earth turn. Life works through us. We are life. This is a great piece of content as well. Teaching on life by observing nature. Healthy attitudes towards life. Building a new relation to what happens. We want to bridge oneness. We want to bridge oneness and relation. We can make the experience of being one with life, and at the same time we need to relate to life. We find ways to interpret how what happens relates to us, to our values and plans, etc. The relation to life means the relation to our inner and outer world. So how do I make my life work then? Well, practical life advice like on rest, work and play, energy management, time management, prioritizing life aspects like the Erfolgsmaster of Maxim. So after all, the question becomes, what is the art of living? Applying the science of the workings of life. The art of living is the art of using the heart to apply science, integrating the polarities, our mental world, our egoic entity and life in us, how life works and how our mind works. Teachings on the mind, healing work and psychotherapy in the section on teaching on the human mind. Video 5. Everything that happens can be used to get back into alignment. Life does the deconditioning work for us. We just need to allow it. Teachings on the human mind, the human condition. The ego. Mental abstraction of who I am with qualities etc. to find one's place in society. The mental abstraction of how the future is going to be. The past re-experiencing in order to learn. Interference for health and overall bonding of society. For example, not sleeping on the table while we eat together, when the other person could get offended. It is to use our mind capacity to ensure that living together is possible in a large society. It is the individual stepping back from their own needs in order to fit into society. The egoic impulse is a suggestion, as is the intuitive impulse. We humans have the power of choice. The egoic entity is the bridge between the real and the unreal. It is real in the sense that it can have a life of itself. And so instead of distinguishing between the real and the false ego, I distinguish between functional and dysfunctional ego. Mechanisms of the egoic entity. Seeking the absolute in an either-or fashion. Dividing is that seeing an isolated cause and trying to get rid of that. Splitting apart, getting rid instead of integrating. Mechanisms of the egoic entity. When you see something in the other that you don't like in yourself or repress in yourself, you get triggered and react strongly emotionally. The reaction to somebody else's comment can be likened to the reaction to our thoughts stating a similar thing. The child almost always reacts to the wishes of the parent, you should be so-and-so, with the transformed wish of himself, I want to be so-and-so, in order to avoid the pain and not being himself. Animals also experience emotions, as it is believed, as well as conflicting impulses. Between, for example, leaving the child to join with the tribe, so self-preservation, and staying with the child. Whatever we can identify, we are not identified with. Being identified means to believe that something is part of you. Identifying something means to see or witness that. So identify means it comes from the root of identical. That's the same root of those two words. So what we identify with is something that we feel identical with, that it feels like it is us, it is part of us. That's what it means to identify with something. But when you can identify something, it means that you can see it is identical to something else that you conceptually know. And in order to identify it, you cannot be identified with it. So in order to be able to abstract, to mentally conceptualize, see that, so that you can resolve that, it needs to be seen as apart from you. That's what it means to let the light of consciousness, the light of your awareness shine onto the things within yourself. As long as they are part of you and you go unconscious and it's just part of your expression, you see it as part of you, then you cannot change it, you cannot transform it. It needs to be seen as something that is not you, but something that happens inside of you. That's what it means to let the light of awareness shine towards these things. So, whatever we can identify, we are not identified with. Being identified means to believe that something is part of you. Identifying something means to see or witness something. Some animals, for example, have it easier to find food. So in the same way as some humans have it easier to attract or make money. But with every strength or every aspect of life comes a challenge or difficulty. So everybody has his share. Just the comparison from a limited point of view taints our vision. So let's focus on the abilities and opportunities and shed away that comparison thinking. I do not need to be perfect to start serving. My weaknesses and still active conditioning talked about the truth and honesty build relatability. The mind is overcome by faith. So every paradox is that. Alright, so this goes into the mission document. Exactly. So we paste that here and we keep going. So yeah, the mind is overcome by faith. So is every paradox. Because the paradoxical opposition is only on the level of mental understanding. Emotionally, the paradox can be felt. Workings of the mind. The ability to mentally distinguish, delineate, and separate. Distinguish, delineate, and separate. This is a great array of words. Exactly. With that ability comes the ability to connect. With the ability to abstract comes the ability to connect. Without the mental separation on the level of objects, we would not be able to select certain separate objects and relate them to one another to form tools, etc. So on the level of society, we needed to mentally distinguish ourselves in terms of strength, contribution capacities, etc. in order to relate and find our own unique place in society and harness our special gifts so that the society as a whole can flourish. Second, the ability to anticipate the future and draw learnings from the past. We do not only, like animals, have an intuitive knowledge of the past that aids the present, but we can mentally replay the past or anticipate the future for the trade-off of the present moment. It keeps alive what we experience as us. This is also part of the egoic entity. The human system has a self-preservation mechanism, that is, it wants to keep itself alive. That also relates to the mind-made entity. As long as we experience it as ourselves, to protect and nourish our mind-made entity is a function of our mind and shows in defense of ideas, etc. 4. Interference mechanism with the natural state or our natural inclination, mechanism of internal attitude towards what happens. Right, so now we pause for a second and forward we go for a few minutes.